to go over the outline for today. First of all, we're going to talk about the different types of colleges that there currently are. There's a lot of different options for everybody, so that'll be really fun to go over. Next, we're going to be talking about choosing a major, so some tips on how you can choose your major. We're going to talk about extracurriculars and building your activities list before applying to colleges. Then we're going to talk a little bit about testing, applying to colleges, because the application processes are all really unique. And finally, we are a mental health organization, so we're going to share some mental health tips, starting off with our first one and some action items people can try out. So yeah, go ahead, Madeline.
So the first thing we're going to cover is college types, which is like what options do you have for college? So some things to consider when you're thinking about what kind of a college you want to go to. The first thing is, do you want to live in a college town, or do you want to be more immersed in a city? The college diversity, is that something that's important to you? What is the diversity like at the schools you're looking at? The location, so nearby opportunities and entertainment, and also the distance from your house if you care about being far from your house or if you want to be closer. Academic rigor of the school, unique features that they might have, the size, if you want a smaller, larger school, the living situation, would you be living at home? Would you be living in a dorm or an apartment? The cost of the school, which also know that financial aid goes into that. So don't let the cost deter you from applying to a school, because you never know what kind of aid you might get. The social mobility index rating, which I'll talk more about in a second. And then your future goals and how the school aligns with those. So what is the social mobility index? The social mobility index, otherwise known as the SMI, measures the extent to which a college or university educates more economically disadvantaged students, meaning with family incomes below the national median, and at lower tuition rates, and graduates them into good paying jobs. So this might be something you want to pay attention to, in which case you can check the website, which I'll put in the chat in a second. And this next slide shows the top 10 rankings for the social mobility index. And this link is also on the weekly handout that we put in the chat earlier. It's a good thing to note that a lot of the top schools on this list are mostly in New York and California. So if that's something that's important to you, you might want to look more in those locations. I'll put that link soon, but there you go.
Yeah, so the link to the social mobility index can also be found on the PDF that we shared a few minutes ago. If you need Madeline to resend that, just say so and we'll do it. We'll go ahead and do that. But yeah, now I'm going to talk about the different types of colleges. Oops, there was something in the chat. I can't see the chat. Give me a second. Okay, yeah, Madeline just put it in the chat. There are so many different types of colleges out there. Obviously, we're going to start off kind of with one of the more localized options, which is community college. This is honestly one of the options that a lot of people don't consider as much as they should. Community college can be a really great place to start, especially if you're not quite sure what you want to do or what you want to major in, but you do want to continue your education. So that's a really good place to start. The location is generally going to be local. So these are local. They're called community colleges because it's a community oftentimes nearby where you're already living. The size in general across the US is going to be less than 9,000 students. So they are a bit on the smaller side, but it does depend. You can have ones that are only a few hundred, and then there's also some that are a few thousand. So you definitely have to kind of look at what's nearby you. Some unique features: if you're in California, you get the first 2 years for free. Which is really awesome for students who are from like lower income backgrounds. If you don't want to pay a whole lot for college and you don't want to go into significant debt, this is a really great option for you. You can also transfer very easily to higher level institutions or like 4-year colleges as opposed to like a 2-year. The cost is also pretty inexpensive. I mean, as far as the US goes, it's under $10,000 annually. And the living situation can be off campus. So usually this means you're going to live at an apartment or at your house. So if you live nearby a community college, if you're in Sacramento, there's CRC, there's Sac City. Those are some great options for people who want to stay at home but still experience the feeling of higher level education. Next off, we're going to talk a bit about California State Universities. These are called CSUs. You'll see that abbreviation often. And they have a lot of different options. There's 23 different locations. One of the really popular ones is Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, also called Cal Poly SLO. And actually one of our colleagues at 916 Rise is headed to Cal Poly. So that's really awesome. There are so many options though, all across California for like very different CSUs. They range from between 1,000 to over 40,000 students. So there's a pretty wide range here. If you want to go to a smaller campus, you can definitely seek out those smaller campuses. Some unique features that I found about the CSUs is that a lot of CSU students will go on to earn their PhD. So if you know that you are someone who wants to continue into like doctoral school or something like that, get your master's degree and get your PhD, maybe it's a great idea for you to apply to these CSUs and find that pathway that you need. In addition, if you were paying attention to the slide a few slides ago about the social mobility index rating, a lot of CSUs fall into that social mobility index top 10. So these are a lot of great options for you if you are really looking to move up socially and be able to like prosper as a, inside the workforce. The cost is approximately $20,000 annually, definitely varies by campus and varies by your aid package. And the living situation is generally on campus. Next, we're also going to talk about the California System of Universities of California, which is the UC system. I'm repping UCLA, sorry, Madeline, but I just had to put it. So yeah, UCLA is one of those UCs, but there are 9 total locations across California. Anybody can apply to these, same as anybody can apply to the CSU. So even if you're not in California, these are really great options for you to apply to. They can be between 7,000 and over 40,000 students. I know UCLA is a huge campus and I'm going to be having like 40,000 peers. So if you're into like that big campus lifestyle, it might be a great idea for you to apply to some UCs and be able to experience that. Unique features that I honestly think are pretty cool is that these are some of the largest public research institutions in the world, and the entire UC system as a whole has actually the largest library in the entire country, I believe. So that's pretty huge. If you're someone who's really into research, these are great institutions for you. The cost is about $35,000 annually, which is definitely a higher price tag, but you can get some pretty great aid. I know that I was like very happy with the aid package that I was offered. So don't be afraid to apply to UCs because you think they might be too expensive. They're definitely going to help you pay for college and access the resources you need. The living situation for these is generally on campus. So in the dorms, in on-campus apartments, but you have the option of living off campus if you want to. Okay, next I'm also going to talk about private universities. The thing about private universities is there are so many options with this. If you are someone who's looking for a very niche school, a very niche campus, maybe that specializes in one major. Maybe you're looking for a drama college or a liberal arts college that focuses on one specific area. These are great options for you because there are so many different private schools across the country. They can range from less than 100 to over 100,000 students. So this is a pretty wide range. You can basically find anything and everything you want in terms of private schools. There are a lot of unique campuses. So any place across the country, you can find these unique campuses. The cost can vary between $20,000 and $80,000 per year. They are a higher price tag school. They are private institutions. But keep in mind that these schools often have like higher endowments, meaning that they get a lot of donations and donors from people who are maybe alumni. And that means that they might be able to help you a lot with your aid package. So even if this looks like it might be too expensive, you might be able to afford it still. So I wouldn't knock it until you go ahead and try it. The living situation definitely varies with private schools. They can be on campus, some of them are off campus. You just have to kind of check. And some examples that are really popular are like NYU, New York University, and Yale University. I think all of the Ivy Leagues are private schools. So if you're someone who's planning to apply to those, these are definitely private universities. Okay, now I'm going to talk about some different options for students from different backgrounds. So one of the really great options that isn't talked about enough is historically Black colleges and universities, which are also called HBCUs. An example that I have here is Spelman College, which is actually a women's college. So there's definitely like women's colleges and men's colleges throughout the HBCU system, if that's something you're interested in. There are, I think, about 107 locations across the country, give or take a few, and they can vary between 2,000 to 11,000 or more students. So pretty small in comparison to like private colleges and stuff like that, but still a good range and still the ability for you to like meet other students. A really unique feature that's pretty important to point out is they have really high graduation rates for people of color. So this is really helpful if you are a student of color and you need the support system that's going to ensure that you're able to graduate. And so this is a really great way to like achieve that goal. There are some public, there are some private, so there's a lot of variety here. And they're pretty relatively inexpensive, about $7,000 annually, which is a lot lower of a price tag than some of the other colleges I talked about. The living situation definitely varies, and some examples are Spelman College, which I believe was rated #1 this past year, and Howard University, which I believe was rated #2 this past year for HBCUs. We also have Hispanic Serving Institutions, which is called the HSI system. This one is actually far less known than HBCUs in the HBCU system, but it's actually really significant, and it's very helpful for a lot of students who identify as Hispanic and would like to seek out resources to help them find community at their college. The location, there are about 400 locations across the country. So a lot of institutions you actually might not even have heard are HSIs that are very popular right now. So we have like Arizona State University, which some of their campuses are HSI institutions. The sizes vary from less than 1,000 to like 55,000 students. So there's a lot of variety here. If you're looking for a smaller school, you have that option. If you want a larger school, you also have that option. The biggest thing that identifies HSIs are that the student population has to be at least 25% Hispanic. So if you're, again, looking for a community and you're a Hispanic student, this might be a great option for you. The cost varies, but it is about $9,000. Same with the living situation. It varies based on which college you go to. And some examples are Arizona State University, Broward College, and Texas A&M University. And then finally, we're going to talk about tribal colleges and universities, also a lesser known like college system for marginalized groups, but one that's really important and has a lot of locations. So the example I have here is Navajo Technical College, but there are a lot of different locations. There's about 32 across the country recognized by the Department of Education, and they can vary from being between 400 people and 1,000 people. So these are oftentimes smaller schools, and oftentimes they'll even be community colleges. So if you're looking for a smaller institution where you can find a community like this, then that's a great place to check. Some unique features are that they tend to have a lot of career preparation and community development programs. So if these are things that you're into, this is a great option for you. The cost is about $3,300 per year. So that's actually pretty affordable in comparison to a lot of the other colleges we talked about. The living situation it varies, but it's oftentimes at home because most of these tribal colleges and universities are like community colleges. So there's a lot of options there. And some examples are Navajo Tech College and Dene College. And yeah, these are some great options if you are looking for a place where you can find some community. Okay, next Madeline is going to lead this really fun priorities activity.
Yeah, so as far as college priorities, we wanted to do a quick activity to get you thinking about what your priorities are. So what you want to prioritize in college, some possibilities might be location, opportunities nearby, cost, academic rigor, social environment, Greek life, professional groups, which can go along with Greek life, the dorms and living situation, food in terms of your allergies or restrictions, like what does the college have available for you, if you want a college town or not, the social mobility ranking, and college diversity. So we're going to give you 3 minutes to rank your potential top 3 priorities for college. And it's okay if these change over time and it's just whatever you're drawn to right now and you think you might want to prioritize. And also, we forgot to say this, but we want to encourage you to put on your cameras if you feel comfortable and take notes if it helps you. And then also feel free to ask questions in the chat or out loud when we give you an opportunity to. All that being said, we'll start the timer for 3 minutes, I guess, unless you have anything else to say, Sara.
Yeah, I will start the timer right now, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that you all have a few seconds to think. So yeah, all right.
Awesome.
All right, so that was the timer that keeps beeping. Good Lord. Okay, we're done with that. All right, so that was the activity. And now we're going to go ahead and just ask a couple people to share out. So if we want a couple people to go go ahead and maybe put their priorities in the chat, or you can unmute and say them out loud. That would be really appreciated, just so we can kind of hear what other people are thinking about.
Yeah, and there are no wrong answers.
Okay, Lucky Paul put in the chat cost, location, and the social mobility index. I think those are some great choices there, and I can definitely see why you might choose those. All right. Colette, what are you thinking for yours? I'm going to pick on you.
Yeah. I'm thinking location, cost, and then the social environment and the opportunities nearby are kind of on the same place.
Yeah. I think that, yeah, that's also very great. It's really interesting to see how like different people are prioritizing different things. And, you know, it's really important to think about what is going to help you the most. So I see London says academic rigor, cost, and location. Those are some great options. And then Maddie says academic rigor, social environment, and professional groups. Yeah, those are also some great options. So yeah, thank you for everybody who just shared right now. I think it's really, sorry?
No,
go ahead, go ahead.
No, I was just to say, and remember in terms of the cost as a priority, that's a great priority. And just keep in mind, like I said, too, that until you get your financial aid package, you know, don't let the cost of a school or like the price tag when you look it up online deter you from applying, even though you're prioritizing that, because that can kind of help you narrow it down for your decision later. But you never know if a super pricey school will end up giving you a ton of financial aid, so it's the same price as another school. Yeah, anyways, sorry, you can go.
Very true. One of our friends who's going to USC, and I'm not proud to say she's going to USC because they are UCLA's rival school, but she's actually going to USC for what would be less expensive than her going to like UC Berkeley or something like that. So yeah, I'm just saying it can be cheaper to go to private schools. It just really depends. Okay, also, I have been getting a lot of messages about this, so I just kind of want to address it out loud. We will put the link to the slideshow in the chat at the end of today's session. So if you wanted to like go back and look at some stuff, you can definitely do that. But we'll do it at the end, so that way you're not like looking ahead on all the info. We want it to be like super top secret and super exciting, you know, so we're gonna have to, you know, keep it a secret for a bit. Okay. So before we go on to any questions, we're actually going to have Miss Katherine Betts go ahead and give their presentation. So let me show the introduction slide because it's really fancy. Okay, sharing my screen again. All right. So Miss Betts, you are welcome to take it away.
I'm sorry, Sarah, could you say the last part again? I was trying to unmute.
Yeah, no worries. You're welcome to take it away and go ahead and get started on your presentation.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Katherine Betts, and I am currently at Ohio State University, and I work in the Student Life Multicultural Center, but I am actually making a transition and will be at California State University, Sacramento as of August 16th in the world there. So I'm very excited. And hopefully I might have the opportunity to connect with some of you all. But I have been in higher education for about 15 years. And so I was asked to kind of talk about being involved and kind of some of the work that I do, especially like while we're talking about some of the different types of institutions. And I work at Ohio State, which is a predominantly white public institution. And I work in the Multicultural Center. And so one of the things to think about when you go to campus is how you might want to be involved, because being involved on campus, meaning participating in student activities, participating in student organizations outside of the classroom actually helps you to feel like it's your campus, and it helps you with academic grades. And I know I'm thinking, as we're having this conversation today, I'm thinking back to my college days, and I actually went to college with Miss Summer, who was also on the call, and we are very proud graduates of California State University, Chico. And for us going to Chico State, we had programs such as the Educational Opportunities Program. We are both members of historically Black Greek or Divine Nine Greek organizations, and we were very involved in different things on our campus. And those activities helped to make a place that was very big, a place that was a predominantly white institution. I'm going to take a guess and say maybe at the time that we were in Chico State, we may have had between 150 and 200 Black students. And the number of students of color or students that represented diverse backgrounds was larger, but it was relatively small to the population of the overall campus. And so it helped us to build relationships with mentors. It helped us to know where to go on campus if we were having challenges or if we needed someone to talk to, because we got to interact with all of these different offices by being in all of these different activities on campus. So I want to encourage everyone to find a way when you go to campus to get involved. Find a student organization, go to the campus's cultural center, go to, if you stay in the residence hall, that is another wonderful way to be on campus. Go to your residence hall's programming. Some of the work that I do, and I've been engaged in for a long time, is I work in the Multicultural Center. And in my particular role right now, I oversee all the initiatives that pertain to African and African American students. And so the reason we have places on campus like a multicultural center or a cross-cultural center or even an educational opportunity office is because when you talk about predominantly white institutions, one of the things that we know is that when colleges were founded way back in the day, back in the early, 16, 17, 1800s, they were founded on a lot of exclusion, meaning that the only people during that time that could go to these colleges were wealthy white males. And so as time kind of went on, there became different laws, that created, the HBCUs and the other minority serving colleges that we talked about earlier in the presentation today, but also things like the Civil Rights Act, which really brought diversity to predominantly white campuses out of activism, brought cultural center programs, and brought, ethnic studies programs, and all of these different things that expanded diversity from, maybe just Black and white to women, to individuals with disabilities, to the LGBT community, to the Latinx, APAM, to all of these different historically underrepresented communities, and created a welcoming space where you can kind of see yourself, right? Where you can see yourself in the programming, where you can go into the office and people know who you are and, feel welcomed, where you can celebrate your culture. And not only that, where you can take these celebrations to the broader part of the university, because we want everyone who comes to college to learn about differences and to be able to, engage and interact with people who are culturally different. And so that is kind of the role that many of these offices have. And so that is a lot of the work that I do on campus. Prior to OSU, I was at the University of Iowa, and I oversaw 4 cultural centers there. And so I have had the opportunity to serve college students and see lots of people graduate, because that's the ultimate goal. We want to see you be successful. We want to see you graduate, and we hope that you come back as an alum. We hope you come back to motivate other people on their journey to know that college is accessible. The college is something that is available, and even things like finances. I know we've been talking about finances a lot today and what is affordable. And I know that it's good to make wise decisions around that. But I also want to say that college is one of the best investments in yourself that you will ever make. You want to make good decisions about, where you receive money from and about taking out loans. But it is one of the best investments in your holistic development that you will ever make. And so I will stop talking in case people have questions, but I am very excited to meet you all, and I wish nothing but the best for everyone on the line. And so if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer any.
Yeah, thank you so much for that presentation. And I just want to again, thank you so much for being able to be here today and share your experience, college communities and how important that is to your development on a college campus. At this time, if anybody has questions, I'm going to stop sharing so I can actually see the chat. But please go ahead and put them in the chat right now, or you can unmute. Trust me, we're not that scary, even if we look a little scary. So we're not going to be yelling at you if you unmute. Definitely go ahead and throw out some questions if you have any. And they can also be about, oh wait, go ahead, Madeline.
I was about to say the same thing as you, so you can go.
I was gonna say, they can also be questions about like the first part of our presentation, which had to do with, you know, different college types. So if you have any questions about any of that, go ahead and ask them now. Okay. What are the purposes of sororities and fraternities? I think Ms. Betts would probably be the best person to answer this if you want to go ahead.
Sure. So, are you talking about like either multicultural sorority fraternities or historically Black sororities and fraternities?
I think they just said more generally.
Sure. I would say overall, like sororities and fraternities are another way of getting students to be involved. It is a they're organizations, and there's three main categories, right? There's the Panhellenic Council, which is the sorority council. There's the Interfraternity Council, and then there's the Multicultural Greek Council, which is where a lot of like multicultural Latinx sororities and fraternities are a part of that council. And then there is the National Panhellenic Council, which is also known as the Divine Nine, or historically Black Greek organizations. So a lot of our organizations were founded, you know, to want to promote sisterhood and brotherhood, to be leaders on their campus, leaders in the community, and to serve. You know, there is an element of community service and philanthropy that is in pretty much most sororities and fraternities. And so when you go to campus, I would encourage you to think about what experience you want to have and to explore. And there's usually a sorority and fraternity life department where you can go on their website and you can look at the different information and the histories of some of the organizations.
Thank you so much for sharing that response. Yeah, I think from my understanding, at least, there are so many options for sororities and fraternities. There's ones that are based on like your background and maybe your interests. There's also general ones that are open to everybody. There's also ones that are like professional sororities and fraternities, where oftentimes it's not even like only women or only men. It's actually everybody mixed together. And it's just people who are interested in one similar topic. So, you know, your academic or your professional topic. So yeah, if that's something that might interest you, that's definitely something you can go ahead and check out whenever you are applying to colleges or exploring your options for college. And yeah, that's a really great, great option to think about. Okay, another question we got in the chat was, do you have to be a person of color or like Hispanic if you want to go to a Hispanic serving institution? From my understanding, you don't have to be a person of color to attend these institutions. Everyone is welcome to apply, but they have historically served students of color. So that's kind of where they get their name, and their title is because they historically have served those underrepresented communities.
That's correct, yeah.
All right. Okay, does anybody else have any questions for either of us? Oh, do you have to pay to be a part of Greek life?
Do you have to pay to be a part of Greek life?
Yes.
Yes, there is typically a fee to join a sorority fraternity, and there are annual dues that you pay every year, and those prices vary based on the organization.
Yes. All right. Anybody else have any questions? We went through a lot of content. That is going to be the most content-heavy section of today's like presentation, because there was so many things to go through with that. But we will share this if you want to like go back and look at some of the information. All right, with that, I think we're just going to thank Ms. Betts and say thank you so much for being a guest speaker today. If you need to leave for your other presentation or your other call, you're free to. But thank you so much for attending.
Thank you so much.
And yeah, we
Absolutely.
really appreciate it.
You all have a great day.
Yes, thank you. Bye. All right, so we're going to continue on with our presentation. We want to continue encouraging everybody. Feel free to take notes. If you want to take notes, feel free to continue asking questions. Write down your questions, because you might like remember or think of it in the moment and then forget. but we will be answering questions after every section of this presentation. So keep those questions going. Feel free to interact with us. This ultimately is supposed to be for you. So make sure you let us know if there's anything we can do to help. All right, we are going to move on to discussing different majors in college. And I'm actually going to start by talking about majors versus minors. So a lot of people have heard of, choosing a major, but not everybody knows that you can also double major or you can choose a minor. A major is going to be your main specialization. It's going to be the focus of your resume when you enter the job force. So when you're looking for a job, whatever your major was in college is definitely going to help you a lot with attaining a job in a certain profession. And it's oftentimes going to require a set amount of credits. It depends on the college that you go to, but it's around 120 credits for that particular major in the classes that pertain to that major, sorry. On the other hand, a minor is kind of seen as a secondary specialization. So this is going to be some extra knowledge. You're not going to be super informed about this topic as much as you would be if it were your major, but you still are going to have that extra bit of information. The great thing about having a minor is it can actually set you apart inside the workforce. You are seen as a more competitive person on the job market because you have a unique set of skills that someone who might share your major might not have. For instance, if Madeline and I both decided to major in education, and Madeline decided to get a minor in musical theater, she might actually have a better resume or a more competitive resume in the job market. Because they'd be like, oh my God, Madeline's so cool. She can do theater and teaching. Whoa. And I'd be like, darn, I can't do that. So yeah, that's how it can kind of make you more competitive in the job market. And oftentimes it's going to require about half the credits that you need for a major. So if you needed 120 credits for your major, you would need only 60 credits for your minor. And that's kind of what separates it. A lot of students will double major, which means that you would take like 240 credits to get two different majors when you get your degree. But yeah, just realize that if you want something that is less time intensive, but still gives you a little bit of an edge over your competition in the job market, then you can definitely have a minor, and that might be really helpful for you. All right, so I'm going to give you all some tips on how you can actually choose a major, because everyone's like, okay, Sara, I get it. I get what a major is, but how do I even decide what I want to do? Here's a couple things that you should keep in mind and kind of the strategy that I used when I was thinking about my major, which is sociology. So first, you want to think about a general subject that interests you. You want to be like, okay, broadly speaking, what is my most interesting subject? Do I like math? Do I like history? Do I like English? Those are kind of some general subject areas. I know for me, I enjoy social studies. I think that, those classes are interesting for me. So I knew that was something that I wanted to consider. Then I want you to go ahead and consider some careers that might involve that subject. With social studies, it's a little bit hard because you're like, okay, I could be a historian, I could be a teacher, and it's a little bit hard to kind of do anything elsewhere. But for me, I personally want to go to graduate school to study law. So I know that my undergraduate degree isn't necessarily going to be like my end-all career. So that just means I can use it as a pathway to get to the career of law. But maybe you're interested in becoming a mathematician or a scientist. You would want to consider careers, like being a scientist or being a biologist that could maybe involve the realm of science. Then you're going to consider some specialties inside those areas. So within those subjects, what are the most specialized topics? Within science, there's a lot of different types of sciences. There's biology, there's chemistry, etc. You want to kind of think more carefully about what are some smaller topic areas I might be interested in. Similarly with me, I like social studies, but I was like, okay, I don't think I want to do history. I think that I'd be more interested in something like anthropology or sociology. Anthropology, because for me, I'm interested in studying cultures, and sociology because I really like seeing how systems and people interact. So that was kind of my thought process with narrowing down my options and seeing what I would want to consider for my majors in college. So now that I've given you a few tips, here are some things not to do, some mistakes that you should be avoiding, because a lot of students make these mistakes and then regret it later. A lot of students will make the decision of their major based on money. But I would recommend to avoid choosing a major just because it's going to make you wealthy. Your parents might be like, you should be a doctor. It's going to make you super rich. You can live in a large, luxurious house. But keep in mind, you're going to have to do that for, as long as you're in the workforce. It might not be enjoyable to be a doctor if you hate science, you don't like working with other people, and it generally just isn't something that appeals to you. Just because the money is good doesn't mean that it's, worth sacrificing your mental health and your well-being to do it. In a similar way, avoid choosing a major just because it's easy. Humans are creatures that need stimulation. And if you are understimulated because something is way too easy, you're going to get really bored and dread going to work every day. So make sure that when you're considering a career, you're not just like, oh, I'm going to do this one. I've heard it's the easiest, major that you could ever choose. You might not actually enjoy it as a career. So remember, it's all about what you make of it. If you choose a major that you are really passionate about, you can turn it into whatever you want. And you can be just as successful with a major that isn't typically seen as one that makes a ton of money or, is really easy to do, as you can be with something that is, stereotypically a money-making major. It's all about what you make of it. So definitely try to avoid making these decisions based off either how easy it is or how wealthy you're going to be in the future, because none of that is for certain, and you are the only one who can control how successful you are with whatever major you have. All right, I'm going to pass it back to Madeline.
So another thing to consider when you're choosing a major is to be flexible, and that can go into different categories of flexibility, but one idea is to choose a multifaceted major, which means it can apply to a lot of different things. So for example, if you chose like sociology, you could apply it to different fields, like Sara's doing law, or you could be some sort of social studies teacher or other things like that. And you could also go undeclared. So if you're not sure what you're interested in at all, you can apply as an undeclared major. And that sometimes can make your application less strong, but it can also not really affect your application. It kind of depends on the school. So it's important to research if there is a school that cares a lot about that. But that can be a good option so that you don't feel stuck in one major. And also know that most schools will allow you to change your major, and that might be something you want to look into if you're not sure about it. You can also double major in different subjects, like Sara was talking about, and know that your major does not equal your career. So it doesn't have to be a straight path from your major to a career. And if you major in something, like Sara was saying, that's not, classically known as a super successful or like a good path major necessarily, it doesn't mean that you're not going to be successful or have a lot of options for you. Like if you major in something like theater that people don't necessarily think is super successful, you still have a lot of options, and it can show people that you are a creative person and you have a lot of extra skills that go into the workforce that don't necessarily mean that it has to be the major that directly applies. And you can help with people's public speaking, that kind of a thing. And also just right now, choose something based on what you're interested in and take the next best step towards your goal. That's something that I had to learn, is that you're not going to know what you're going to love in 4 years or even what you're going to know love at the end of the year. But all you can do right now is choose the next best step based on where you are right now. So right now you can choose something that you're interested in, and you always have the option to change it later, or choose a school based on a different major that you wanted to go to.
Yeah, and something that we kind of forgot to add in here, but I think is really interesting, there's a lot of schools that are offering majors that are very intersectional. So I've actually seen the major of psychology and computer science. That is the whole major. It's both of those things. So it talks about how those two things interact with each other. These can be really great options if you're like, well, I like psychology, but I also might want to do computer science. That's a great major for you because you can do both and you can see how they interact, and that can kind of push you toward a career that you are actually going to enjoy because you're doing two things that you really like. So think about those careers. There's a lot of super unique careers that nobody has heard of and super unique majors. And actually, Madeline is going to introduce how you can look into those right now. Yeah. So take it away, Madeline.
And really quickly, in that same field, you can also major and minor in different things and then end up specializing in your minor, but having something to do with your major. And any education is helpful. So now we're going to do a majors activity. So we're going to put a link in the chat, and we want you to check out the majors list and then take the majors quiz to help you identify what majors you might like. So you're going to have 7 minutes to do this activity, and we think it's just helpful to look at what major options there even are, and it's different at every school. And then not only that, but see kind of what a quiz might tell you might be good at. And it might be something totally different than what you thought of, but it's always helpful to have more ideas. So the first link I'm putting in is the list of majors, and then the second link is going to be the quiz. So we're gonna give you 7 minutes right now and just do your best at looking at the options and taking quiz.
I realized that I was muted while I was trying to talk. This quiz is actually fun. Madeline and I took it together and we felt that it was really nice because it gives you a very broad result. It doesn't just like say, this is the one major that you would be best suited for. It gives you some options. So I would definitely go ahead and take it in these next few minutes and also look at this list that we were just talking about, which is the ACT list of, common college majors and occupational choices. Definitely go ahead and we're going to discuss after. So, we're going to talk about what people thought and what people got chosen for. So I will put on a timer and some music in a second. Okay, so I hope that everybody had enough time to go through, probably more than enough time to go ahead and take that quiz. Let me just say, Madeline and I did like 10 quizzes together on a Zoom call. And for us, that one felt the most accurate. And we liked that it was very broad. So hopefully you felt the same way. We had Mr. Greg, who's one of our facilitators, also do it. And he got some very interesting results that were like super close to what I would picture for him. So I'm just saying, I think it's pretty accurate. Does anybody want to share like some themes that they saw from doing the quiz? Shreya, I might just pick on you because I just want to bother you right now.
Sure. Should I just like read off?
Yeah.
So it says you're an entrepreneur. That's one I got. I actually twice in this time. So I got that both times. And then when someone asks for a volunteer, you're first hand up. I got healthcare, education, public health, and social justice. Got all of those.
Do you feel that those are things that you might be interested in?
Yeah, actually, I haven't really thought too much about too many of these, but now I'm gonna look at them.
Awesome. Well, I'm really glad. Hopefully it helped and kind of, none of these things are certain. This is a random quiz we found on the internet, so take it with a grain of salt, but it might just push you in a direction you weren't considering. Jillian says in the chat, got both biology, biochem, health sciences, and your artistic side, which is awesome because Jillian and I have worked with each other and we're very artistic. So that's really cool that really showed up in your quiz because I think you do great in a major where you could be like artistic and creative. So that's really awesome. Okay, does anybody else want to share their results from this?
Yeah, I could also be entrepreneur and in the international business major, which is the one that I was considering before. So it was, it's great.
Okay, awesome. That's really cool, Gerardo, that you got some pretty accurate results there. I hope that everyone who took it felt that they got something that maybe gave them a little bit more guidance. Picking your major is probably one of the most confusing and stressful parts of like applying for colleges because you have to like declare it when you apply. And some schools you have to declare it officially. Some you can like just say what you might be interested in. So it's really great to at least have an idea of what you want to do and a realm of what you want to do. But yeah, I'm really glad that went well for everybody. So now we are going to move forward in the presentation. And here we go, back to Madeline. Oh, wait, we didn't answer any questions. Does anybody have any questions about your major? Because that's like a really important area. Does anybody have any questions for us?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was wondering about if you had an undeclared major, would it be more competitive to get into the school? Because I know that I heard that it was like most people had an undeclared major.
Yeah, so since there are a lot of students who have undeclared, it can become difficult for colleges to figure out where you would fall into the placement. So oftentimes when they're accepting people, there's only so many people that they can accept in one particular field, because otherwise there wouldn't be any courses left for students to take if like everybody went into medicine or everybody went into biology. It'd be really hard to fill like every other class because nobody would be taking those. So when you go undeclared, it is a little bit harder to get into some schools, certain schools, not all of them, just because they don't really know where to place you. So it's hard for them to see who to compare you against. What you can do, I think for the UCs, this is an option at most of them, I want to say, you can do undeclared in a realm of areas. So you can do like undeclared College of Letters and Sciences. So that has like certain majors within that college. You know, every university has like smaller colleges within it. So that might make you a little bit more competitive because at least you have an idea of what you want to do.
I think also sometimes it can help to just choose a major that you're interested in now so that it can help you make you more competitive. Oh my gosh, I can't speak. Help make you a more competitive candidate, and then just make sure the school you're applying to has rules where you can change your major fairly easily. But yeah, like Sara was saying, you can either do kind of an undeclared type major in a field, which might help. And if you talk about in your personal statements, like things you're interested in or like why you're undeclared potentially, that could make you stand out as a candidate, even though your major isn't as specific. So there's always ways to kind of work around it if that's something that you feel passionate about.
Yeah, and I'm actually like, I'm definitely considering shifting my major, and I know Madeline has been considering it a lot too. We both are not sure. So this just goes to show you can be in college or like about to go to college and still not be sure. Like I have, you know, friends and family members who did not officially choose until their first year of college. So keep in mind, it's not going to be like legally binding. You're not like stuck in this major forever. As long as you get into contact with your college counselor once you're in college, you still have the opportunity to be able to change into a different major. So don't feel like too much pressure to pick something that you feel like you're going to be stuck with forever because there's a lot of opportunity to change it. So options. All right. Does anybody have any other questions about this section?
I'm sorry, but I think I wasn't here when you explained this. Which is the main difference between a career and a major?
Yeah, so a major is basically your main focus. It's going to be the main focus of your degree. Oftentimes, you'll have to take like 120 credits for it. And this will be like what you mainly put forth when you're going into the job market and you're looking for a job. You're going to like put your major on your resume. Your minor is going to be half as many credits. So if it was 120 credits to get a major, it'll be 60 credits to get a minor. This is a smaller type of like specialization. So you're not totally specialized in this, but you do have some background knowledge on it. And it can supplement your major and make you a more competitive candidate on the job market. Because, for example, this is the example I said earlier, but if Madeline and I both major in like history or both major in teaching, but then Madeline decides to do musical theater as a minor, now she has a little bit more of an edge over me in the job market because she has this really unique thing that she has on her resume. You know, that she could potentially continue getting educated for or could use toward a profession.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. Like Sara was saying, sometimes, you know, your minor can show that you have a different area of specialty, or like within your major, you could focus on something else. Like if I minored in musical theater and majored in education, like she's using, I could be a drama teacher, or I could like help out with their program, or I could bring, you know, music and theater into my classroom, which could help emphasize like different things in the class anyways. So
yeah, for sure. And Lucky Paul has a question about if you can be denied from your major if it's super competitive. Yes, you actually can. So my brother applied to UC Santa Barbara for mechanical engineering. He ended up getting into the college, but he didn't get into the major. So they said, you have a place at our college, but not in the major you chose because it's really competitive at that school. So sometimes you'll be in a situation like that where you're like allowed to go to the school, you've gotten into the school, but you didn't get into the major that you wanted to get into. That makes sense. Yeah. Okay, so we are now going to move forward. Sorry for like jumping the gun there a little bit. Now we are going to go on to our next section, which Madeline is going to introduce.
If I can unmute myself. Yeah, okay. So our next section is extracurriculars. So we're going to be talking about how you can build your activities list, which is a big part of your application when you're applying to college. So, okay. So what you can include on your activities list, there are two main categories of things you can include. One is personal and one is interpersonal. So personal means activities you've done for personal development, and these can be like you paint in your free time, you sing, you write things, you know, or any hobby type things that are more for yourself than they are for a community-based activity. And then interpersonal is the opposite. It's activities you've done with others or with the community. So that could be doing musical theater with a company, or doing volunteer work, or doing a club, something like that. So both can be really valuable to your application, and a combination of the two can show that you have different abilities, and you know, you're willing to work with people, and you also are an independent person, which can be helpful. And as far as what you can include, we also have a more specific list of ideas. So for example, you could have service groups like CSF, Key Club, 916 Rise, which is the organization we're a part of. You could also do drama and theater, or babysitting, or taking care of your own siblings, which is, if you have family responsibilities, you can include those on your activities list, which might not be something you automatically think of.
Madeline, I don't know if everybody else.
Commitment to your family. Other things are tutoring or teaching others in some way, musical lessons, either teaching or taking them, lessons in a subject area, being on a cabinet of a group or leadership, school-centered clubs like ASB, student government, any other types of clubs at your school, competitive sports or school sports. It doesn't really matter. It's good to have things that are involved with the school, and it's also good to have things outside of the school. So either a combination of the two or one or the other can both be positive. Debate, mock trial, model UN, entrepreneurship or personal endeavors, research that you've done with an institution, educational summer camps, awards and honors like GPA, local awards, academic programs and competitions. All of these, I know it's a long list, but these are all just examples of things that you can include, because sometimes you don't automatically think of things that you have on your resume that could count.
Yeah, and I do want to emphasize what Madeline said earlier. Hopefully my internet isn't waking out again, because it was being weird a second ago. I want to emphasize the taking care of sibling and family responsibilities. I have a friend who has to take care of his siblings part-time because he only has a single parent right now. So as a result, he isn't able to participate in a ton of extracurricular activities. That means that it makes him harder to come out as competitive in his college applications. This is a great reason why you can put taking care of your siblings on your college application, because if it really impacts your life and maybe hinders your ability to do other things, like, you know, you want to do debate, but you don't have the time because you have to take care of your siblings, that's a great reason for you to put it on your college application. It's going to demonstrate better for the people reading your application why you have fewer extracurriculars or something like that. So it's just kind of a helpful way for them to be able to get a read of your specific situation.
Also, as we talk about this, it's important to note that you can basically make anything work. And what I mean by that is that if you have like 2 activities, you can write an essay about why you decided to only spend your time doing 2 activities, or because you have really high test scores and you spent a lot of time studying for the SAT, and so you didn't do many extracurriculars that year. You could explain that in an essay, or, you know, that you were, you know, taking care of your siblings and that's why you didn't do things. So you can kind of make anything work, whether you have a ton of activities or very few activities. Essays are a really good place to put that in there, which we're going to talk about next week anyways. So we'll have more details.
So Madeline and I want to talk about specialization and well-roundedness. This is something I actually didn't know about going into college app season, and I'm a little bit sad I didn't, because I think it could have helped me better develop my resume to be more specific. So Madeline's going to talk about specialization.
Yeah. And before I even start covering specialization, just know that a lot of this activity stuff is, especially because we have a lot of older students here, it's not as much about like what can you try and fit in your schedule like now last minute, but more about how can you frame what you already have to make it work for different categories, and even what else can you do before you have your application, but don't feel like you have missed out on doing so many things that you need for your application. So specialization is having a lot of experience centered on one area of interest. And there's definitely different types of specialization, but I'm talking about it because I had a more specialized activities list, I guess. The real meaning of this is just I had a common theme through a lot of my activities, and I had a lot of activities that fit into one bubble, basically. And so my thing was music and musical theater. And so I had a lot of activities that fit into that bubble. And we don't know exactly what got us into colleges, but we both have different resumes, and I had a lot of activities and I had some well-roundedness, and then I also had specialization in this one area. And so both are good options. And if you have things that fit into that, that can be a helpful way to kind of frame your activities list. And also if you want to connect some essays to that, that can be helpful. And a big thing with specialization is that the order of your list really matters. It can be helpful to more frame it if you want to frame yourself as a more specialized person, to put the things with a common theme all together in your list so that you can tell like, oh, this person does a lot of things in this one area. And so Sara's going to show my activities list, I think.
Yeah, I will actually talk about well-roundedness before I show the examples.
Okay, perfect.
But in comparison to specialization, well-roundedness means that you have a lot of very unique experiences that are centered on a lot of areas of interest. If you know me, if you've been to school with me, I do pretty much anything I can get my hands on. I just get excited about a lot of stuff, and then I do all the things. Obviously, this makes me a person who has a probably very confusing resume to read because it's like really random stuff all kind of thrown together. That's considered well-roundedness. I played a sport. I did not play an instrument, but I did like, public speaking and stuff like that, advocacy work. So I had a more well-rounded portfolio of like academic interests and activities. And this made it seem, this is just a little bit different than the specialized. So instead of having like one focus that I did a lot of work on, like, Madeline taught vocal lessons and also participated in music and took music classes, but also took musical theater classes. Like those are all very specialized, whereas mine were kind of just like, here's everything and let me throw it at you in a pile. So we're going to show you actually our examples. Don't let these scare you. Keep in mind, Madeline and I are both very, I don't know how to say this. We overachieve about everything. So don't let these scare you. You don't have to do everything to get into a particular college. But we just kind of want to be able to share with you something that might just give you some idea of what we do. So Madeline can go first and talk about your list of activities.
So I'm going to start off by saying don't really pay attention to the format of this because it's not cute. But I just wanted to show this to show examples of things I've done and how they kind of fit in different areas. So it might be kind of hard to tell, but basically I have like multiple things that fit into different categories. And then I have a lot of things that fit into theater, for example. So I just wanted to show this as like, I've done musical theater productions. I was a company captain, so I assistant directed. I did lighting design. I volunteered at my theater. I like did a program for theater. I taught voice lessons, take voice lessons. So those are all kind of one category of thing, even though it's a lot of different things. And I could have also done like 3 of those and it still would have been considered specialization if you do more than one thing that has a common theme. And then I also kind of had the well-roundedness part of it in like student government, CSF, babysitting, and then combining those with the things I did for music. And so I could have done a half that. I wouldn't recommend necessarily doing 10 million activities because it's very stressful and, not great for your mental health, which is something that we're talking about. But it can also work for some people. And I know people who thrive with busyness. So just at this point, obviously you might not have a ton of time to pick new activities anyways, but if you are feeling like overwhelmed by our talk about activities, just know that that doesn't mean you are necessarily like a better applicant or anything just because you have a ton of things, and less can be more and quality over quantity always. So if you have a couple activities or just do anything in your free time at all, you'll be good. You make it seem better than it is, no matter what it is,
Yeah, you can always frame things like Madeline said. It's really about the framing. Like you can't change what you haven't done. You can't go back and be like, okay, now I'm going to take 15 years of voice lessons in 1 year. Like, I'm sorry, that's just not going to happen. So it's really about taking what you have and framing it in the correct way. And I'm going to show you my activities list. And then I'll talk a bit about what I think were some flaws with my activities list. There is a lot of content on here. It is very organized, but maybe a little bit too much stuff here. So we have CSF, speech and debate. A lot of people know me from speech and debate who are here. Shout out to like Shreya, Maddie, those people. We have like a student advisory council, which is a school district council, National Honor Society, Latin Club, like a lot of school clubs, and then stuff outside of school. So I play competitive soccer. I did a 2-week summer program that was based around research, leadership, and science, which was really cool. And then Youth Rise, which is what you all are here you're working with us right now, in Tutorly, which is tutoring, and then some employment opportunities and awards. Awards are really helpful because they can help you to highlight some accomplishments you have in certain areas. And this is where the specialization and well-roundedness come in. If you look here, I have a ton of random stuff that I just threw at you. If you were to read it, you'd probably be like, okay, Sara, slow down. There's a lot of things here. So this would be considered well-rounded. But if you look more at like my awards, a lot of them are centered around mental health and speech and debate. So public speaking and mental health advocacy. And that kind of had that more centered approach. And so that made me more specialized in some areas. We also have another one here, which is one of our friends who shan't be named because they're anonymous now. And this is just some ideas of things you could do. So like leadership, summer at City Hall, youth at City Hall, the SCOE Youth Summit. SCOE stands for Sac County Office of Education. Then coping and support center, so mental health work, sports right here, and volunteering activities down here. So these are just some examples of things you could do, CSF, Link Crew, as like leadership activities, and putting those in with other activities you might already be doing. So hopefully that didn't scare you, because I know a lot of you are applying soon to colleges, but keep in mind it's really about how you frame things, and no one college is going to get you, or no one like list of stuff is going to get you into any college. Okay, Gerardo and Colette both have your hands up. Is it about me stopping the share? Or do you have questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Like, which is the extension you normally would prefer to have on that type of essay?
What do you mean?
The extension of the text, like how long should it be?
Oh, okay. So it depends on who you're applying to. So we'll talk about this more when we go to the more specific applications, because there are like UC applications, then there's private schools and common applications, but they vary between 350 words, sometimes even less, sometimes like 100 words. I've had 200 character essays, which are awful to write. But then there's also ones that are like 750. So it definitely varies. But this was more talking about the activities list. So just kind of, so the stuff you could put on your like resume, your college activities list. And then Colette, you have a question?
How far back should we go for our extracurricular activities? Is it like just high school? Because I did a lot of stuff in middle school and elementary school too. So
yeah, this is something Madeline and I were talking about this earlier. We were going to show a different resume, but then it kind of frightened us because of how much stuff there was on there and how it felt like not attainable for every student. You know what I mean? So we are not sharing that resume, but someone had like 15 years of classical piano. And so if you've been playing piano for like since the age of 3, I guess, then you could put that on your resume. If you've been playing piano since the age of 10, that's something you could also put on your resume. Anything that you've been doing consistently for a long time is a good option. Or like, I know Colette, you did a ton of theater with both of us. So if you want to like put, that you've done musical theater since the age of whatever age, and then kind of show how you have centered a lot of the stuff you've done after that around what you started off doing.
For sure. I think it depends on, like Sara saying, like what it is, because I think if it's like something that you did for a year in elementary or middle school, you don't want to include that because it's not really relevant to you today. So if it's a shorter thing, I would say stick to high school. But if it's a long-term thing, it's helpful to include the amount of years you've been doing it, or you've been doing it since elementary school, because that emphasizes the commitment you have to the thing, which is something else that I wanted to mention, is that the longer you've been doing something, the better it looks to them. And it's, as opposed to having like a ton of short things, which is also a great option, you can have like less things that you've been doing for a long time, which can also look good. And you can also stretch what counts in your resume, like we're saying about, like taking care of family, or you painted and you brought it to some exposition or something. You can just kind of stretch the boundaries of what you think should count on your activities list. So yeah. Anyways.
Okay, Colette, do you have a follow-up question to that, or do you feel like you got it answered? What?
I have a question,
Okay.
but Maddie can go first.
Okay, Maddie, go ahead.
If you're currently taking like college, like pre-college courses, but for college credit, do you put that on your resume as well?
Yes. They will oftentimes have like a section where you type in that information, usually when you like put in your grades. So it might have a separate section. But if it's not included there, absolutely make sure that you let them know that you've taken college courses, because that'll definitely show a different part of your like academic achievements.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. And then Colette, go ahead, Colette.
So how should we organize the activity list? Should it be like based on like, oh, I've been doing theater for some odd years, so I'll put that first, or is it like based on section?
Madeline, you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. I think it depends on what kind of activities you're deciding to put on the application and how you're framing it. Because, for example, if you are kind of framing your entire application on you are like a music person and like that is what you're studying, or that's just a really big part of you, you might want to put all your music stuff first so that it kind of goes along with that idea. But if you're kind of less centralized on one topic and you just want to show that like you're really committed to things and you've done a lot of activities, you might want to list ones that are longer time periods first so that it shows you're committed. And even if you're not centralized, you could also organize it by category. So like you have all your leadership things in a row and then you have your music things in a row. So I think it depends on which application it is and what your goal is with your application, which is kind of the same way you can pick and choose which activities you're putting on each application depending on the length and what you're applying to. It's a long explanation, but yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, and mine was, again, sorry, the feedback is weird. Mine was a little bit weirder because I had just lots of random stuff that I didn't really know how to organize. So the way I organized mine was in order of importance to me. So, I put things that I've been investing a lot of time and energy into consistently towards the top of my list. I think I had so if you know me from speech and debate, I'm very into that. I've been doing that for 4 years. So that was towards the top of my list. I also had, what else I had 916 Rise at the top of my list because that was something that was important to me and that I've been doing a lot of work with. So I would put things that you want people to see at the top. And remember, even though there's like 20 spaces for you to put different extracurriculars, that doesn't mean you have to use all of them. If there's something that you only did for a year and you really didn't care about it all that much, you don't have to include it in your list. Okay, so hopefully that answered your question. Also, apologies, we probably are going to go a bit over time. I understand if you have to leave at 3:30, but if you wanted to stay after, you can definitely continue on with the rest of this presentation. We were going to have a break, but I think we're just going to continue and push forward. Okay, so now that we have answered questions regarding that, we are going to do a really fun activity, which is called a brain dump activity. So basically, we have given you a ton of examples of things that you could put on your resume / extracurriculars / awards list. What I want everybody to do now for the next, we'll probably make this more like 3 minutes. So I'll give you a 3-minute timer. For the next 3 minutes, I would like everybody to go ahead and just on a random piece of paper, if you have one around you, write down everything you can think of. I would tell you that the hardest part is you're like, oh my God, wait, what else can I put on here? There's a lot of things that you probably weren't considering in the past that you could put on there. So I want you to take the next 3 minutes to go ahead and do that. I'm going to put this list back up because I think it's good for like inspiration, and I'll just let everybody know when the 3 minutes are up. Also, I think your name is Kavish. Do you want to ask?
Yeah, it's Kavish. I have to leave at 3:30, so I was wondering how I could get the recording for like later.
Yeah. So I have to download it onto my computer, and then we'll put it in a Google Drive, and we'll email that out to everybody.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for coming. All right, so it has been about 3 minutes. Hopefully that was enough time for everybody to just write down a few things that they're very interested in having on their application. I'm just going to have a couple people share out loud maybe what your top thing that you want to put on your application is, what you would put towards the top of your list, because that's something that's either really important to you or you've done for a substantive amount of time. So I'm going to call on someone. If you don't want to share, just say like, I'm not interested or something, but I think it's fun to like hear from people who we haven't heard from yet. So what about Cameron? Do you want to share maybe what your top thing on your list would be? It's up to you.
My top thing would be playing competitive soccer for about 9 years now.
I think that's a really great option. That's something you've done for a long time. Hopefully it's something that you're interested in. And then, yeah, I think that would be a really great option to put on there. Okay, I'll call on one more person. London, what would you put at the top of your list if you were to write your activities list right now?
I would probably say that I've been doing rowing for a little over 2 years now. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's a great option, especially because it's more of a like niche sport. Not every student has done rowing before. So that's a really great one to put at the top and kind of show people that you have diverse interests. So yeah, I think those are some great options. You all definitely grasp the concept of this. And this is something you can do. I would recommend continuing to make your activities list for a while because it's hard to think of everything all the time. So keep a note in your phone or something and then just keep adding stuff as you continue to do stuff or like as you continue to remember something that you did or that you started a few years ago and you're continuing to do. That'll help you to keep track because sometimes it's like, oh my god, this is just overwhelming. How do I remember everything I've done? Or what can I think about that might be good for my activities list? So
yeah, definitely. I know I forgot some things on my actual application just because I hadn't been thinking about it for long enough and you're like, I did that for 5 years, why? So definitely think about it early on.
Yeah. And then the last thing we want to emphasize with this is that your wording does matter. So we have a list that we linked in this file right here. It's the activities list buzzwords. These are kind of words that you can use to kind of elevate your, oh, thank you, Maddie. I'll see you later. This is a list of things that you can use to elevate your wording so that you come off as somebody who is very just comes off as somebody who's professional and understands the value of the things that they're doing. So instead of using a phrase like work with, you could say that you collaborated with somebody. Instead of saying that you made something, you could say that you cultivated something. These words are a lot more exact than just saying like made or work with. And they also will elevate your application because your reviewer is seeing that you're demonstrating that you understand the value of something that you did, and you're putting that into very exact words. What I will say here is admissions officers read a lot of apps every single day, so it's important to make yours stand out. But if you normally wouldn't talk in a way that this would make sense, or you don't know if it grammatically makes sense, you don't have to do this. You can just definitely use layman's terms. It's important to come off as genuine, even if you want to sound elevated. So it's a balance between those two, but
yeah, and it's just a good way to make things that you've done look that much better, even if you don't think it's like that incredible of a thing. You can emphasize the good parts of it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we kind of went over questions, but does anybody have any like last minute questions with this, or can we move on to testing? Okay, I got a thumbs up from Coletti Spaghetti, so it has to be good. Okay, cool. We're going to talk about testing now. This is pretty brief, but just kind of want to give y'all a warning about testing requirements because if it weren't for COVID, I probably couldn't have applied to a lot of schools I applied to. I just didn't have the background in testing and certain things I needed to get done in order to even apply. So here's some examples of what those might look like. The SAT. A lot of students will have they take this at their school. I know if you go to Kennedy, we actually get this paid for from our school or from the college board or whatever. So you should definitely take the SAT and take it seriously because as annoying and as biased as standardized testing is, it's still used by a lot of colleges. So at least having, one round of SAT testing under your belt is going to make you competitive as an applicant. And it's going to open doors because some places you can't even apply if you don't have an SAT score. So that's going to open doors. Same with the ACT. While the SAT tests your math and reading and writing, the ACT, also tests science. So if you're somebody who's really good at math and science and maybe not as good at English, but you're okay, the ACT is going to be better for you than the SAT because the ACT is more focused on those math and science as opposed to reading and writing. So that's really helpful. I know like my brother did well on the ACT, whereas I did better on the SAT because that's just like what our areas of interest are. Okay, there's a comment in the chat. Okay, bye, Jill. Thanks for coming. In terms of AP testing tests a particular knowledge on a subject. So you'll oftentimes take a class, but you don't have to take a class. So if you took Latin outside of school or something like that, and you want to take the AP Latin test, you can do that and get credit for it as a language credit when you go off to college. So to answer Coletti Spaghetti's question, when should we take the SAT or ACT? I would recommend in your sophomore or junior year, so that way you have those scores available for your senior year. You could take them this summer before your senior year, at least for Colette. I know you're about to be a rising senior, so you could take them now, but I recommend doing them as soon as you can, just to make sure that you have them available and that you don't have delayed answers or whatever. There's also SAT subject tests. Except for this year, a lot of the Ivy League schools actually require you to have multiple SAT subject tests to even apply. So I decided to apply to a couple Ivies, and the only reason I was able to apply to them is because they waived the SAT subject test requirement for this year because of the pandemic. But if they hadn't, I wouldn't have even been able to apply. So keep that in mind. There's some weird requirements. I know MIT has some very specific requirements about SAT subject tests. And if you're at a school that does IB instead of AP or maybe alongside AP, you should make sure you're getting those IB tests done, which test your academic and cultural understanding of those subjects. So yeah, that's a brief synopsis on all of those. Does anybody have any questions before we move back to the next one?
Also, definitely pay attention to the schools you're applying to if they have any updated policies because of COVID, because some of them have just started adapting to not having testing as a requirement. So pay attention to those and make sure you're not going based off of like old requirements and then you don't have what you need.
That's true. Okay, somebody asked me in the chat, if you do take the SAT or ACT, do you have to send your test score in? So that depends. For our, Madeline and I are class of 2021. So when we were applying, it was during the pandemic and they waived that. We actually didn't have to submit that. I ended up actually submitting mine anyway, because I thought, if everybody's not submitting their score, maybe it'll help me to submit my score. I don't know if it did. I'm not an admissions counselor, so I couldn't tell you, but I would recommend sending in your score if you feel comfortable with it. You can retake the SAT. And you can retake the ACT. So that's why I said get a head start. If you're a sophomore, take them this year, because it'll help you to get a head start and be able to retake if you don't like your score. There's also resources online where you can ask for what is the average SAT score that students who get into this college have. If you have a lower score than that average, it doesn't mean you can't get in. There's definitely students who've got into these elite colleges with low SAT scores. But it just might help you, is what I'm saying. So you can retake it as much as you need. Okay. Madeline, do you have to add something?
No, I was getting ready for the next section.
Oh, okay. Madeline's like, I'm ready. So now we are going to talk about applications. Go ahead, Madeline.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about the different types of applications and the different parts of applications. I'm going to try to go fairly fast on this part because I know we're already over time, but it's all important information. So pay close attention if I talk fast. Okay, so the parts of the application, each application varies, but generally you're going to have the educational background part, which is your grades, and it's kind of more of the data inputting part. Then you have activities and awards lists, which also goes into data inputting. And then there's essays and personal insight questions, which is more where you have to be creative and write something longer that'll take a while. And then lastly, there's supplemental materials. So a lot of schools will require letters of recommendation. The amount varies, but usually it's 2 to 3, I would say. Extra essays are sometimes a thing that you have to do. For example, if you're applying to a private school using a common application, which I'll talk more about later, you might also have to write essays besides the common application essay because the school requires those supplemental essays, but they are needed to get into the school. And extra requirements are most common for artistic majors, but some of those could be a portfolio or videos or auditions, etc. So if you are going into a more artistic major, I would definitely look into that as soon as possible because it takes a long time. I started out wanting to apply to musical theater majors and didn't realize that it's an insane process and you have to go through videos and pre-auditions and auditions and callbacks, and it's crazy. So it's a very different process than the normal application process, and so definitely look into that as soon as possible if you're even slightly considering an artistic major. Okay. And then also in terms of applications, there's things called early decision and early action, and so you can apply to different schools using these, I don't know, you call them programs, decisions, and so
it lists on the Common App, do you want to apply early decision or early action? It's a different deadline type of thing.
And you can look up on the college you're applying to if they have this and what their deadline is and if it's early decision versus early action. I honestly didn't know the difference for the entire time I was applying, and now I know. So early decision is legally binding, which is a very big deal. And when you're accepted as an early decision, you must attend that college. So it very much closes your options. You can only apply to one school early decision, and it's good if you are 100% sure you will attend if you get in. So if you have one dream school that you've been working towards your entire like school career and you are like so confident you would go to that school if you got into it, this is especially prevalent for like Ivy League schools that are more reach schools, then this might be an option that you want to consider. But just know that it's a very big decision and you're basically deciding where you want to go if you were to get into all your schools. Then there's such a thing as early action, which is a lot less strict. So early action is non-binding. You receive an early response to your application, which is fun. You don't have to respond until the normal May 1st deadline, which is also nice. And it's good for a priority application without the commitment. So I did a couple early action decisions, and it was just nice to kind of have, it's a little bit weird because you don't get all your decisions at once, but it's kind of nice to know you have some options beforehand and be like, okay, I at least have one school I got into because you have your early action decision. And it can also be nice if you know for sure you probably want to go to one place that you can apply early action to. So those are both good options. And then application types, there's 5-ish, we think, main types of applications, unless we're missing something. But the first one is the UC application, so the University of California, like we talked about earlier. You can apply to the UC system all together with the UC app, so it's one application for all of the schools. You input each school that you would want to go to on that application, and then you use the same information for all of them. Meaning if you're applying to different majors, you might not want to super focus on one major with your essays type of a thing, as opposed to the common app where you might be applying to, you know, different schools and you can use your supplemental essays to go with your school. Then there's the CSU app, which also you're applying to all the schools together. This one doesn't have essays, which is really nice. And you just kind of do data inputting stuff. It kind of has like the least information possible about you. So it's a little confusing how they didn't make decisions at the more competitive ones. But just know it's a lot more about academics, and they ask you like how many hours have you done volunteer work with no examples. So it's a lot more of an easy application if you want to prioritize the harder ones first. And know that you do not have to write essays, which is a nice bonus. Then there's the community college application, which you also don't have to write essays for. You can do honors programs, which I'll talk more about later, at community college, I believe. Wait, maybe that's CSU. I don't know if I'm saying the right thing. But you should look into the different requirements if you want to do something more specialized at community college, if that is an option. And then there's the Common App, which is to apply to pretty much all private schools. There's some that require the Coalition app, but they're pretty similar applications. Common App is the most common. Yeah, didn't mean to do that, but it's separate for each school. So you are applying and you're putting in different information for each school-ish, I think. You also have supplemental essays. I'm trying to think back to the application process, and it is now leaving me. But basically, you have one Common App essay that would apply to all your schools with. And then for private schools, the usual thing to have supplemental essays, so you can kind of be more focused in those. But you want to be careful with your Common App essay to have it make sense for all your schools. And this is also where we're going to be uploading letters of recommendation, all that stuff. And the Coalition app is a pretty similar thing. I applied to the University of Washington using the Coalition app. I don't know why they want it to be different, but you know, the different schools have their different little things that they like to do. So you apply to specific private schools using this application, and it's pretty similar to the Common App, so you can kind of use the same information, but each application has a different amount of activities required too, and so it's important to pay attention to that when you're thinking about what activities you want to include. For example, the UC app, you have like 20 or something slots open, whereas the Common App, you have like 10, I want to say, and the Coalition, I think you have like 7, so it just keeps getting more narrow, and you have to pick and choose what's most important to you and what makes the most sense for the schools you're applying to with those applications. Anyways, lots to say that there are different types of applications, and you want to pay attention to the different ones you have to do for each school, and make sure you definitely pay attention to the supplemental things you need to do for the individual schools too. So it's a lot of deadlines and stuff, and yeah, we'll talk more about planning later, but all important. Then there's honor programs in colleges. So there's a difference between the two, kind of. So honors colleges are a separate and unique residential college experience, is the definition. And then honors programs are programs you fulfill as you get your degree within one of the university's colleges or schools. So either way, typically the benefits of honors programs or colleges are that you get smaller class sizes, senior instructors, priority registration, active mentorship, and access to research opportunities. And not all of these are going to be applicable to every program or college you apply to, but they do oftentimes have different perks. And so at my school, I'm in the scholars program, and it's kind of a combination of both. It's like I'm in a program, but I also, on my residential hall, like the entire floor is going to be scholars program people. So there are kind of more flexible programs like that too. And there are some that you apply to before or at the same time as your application, and sometimes you're invited to them, which is how mine works. So it depends on what kind of a thing you're looking for and what school it is. But if you're interested in that, research the process that schools you're applying to have and which ones have what you want. Yes, we can go to mental health now.
All right, does anybody have any questions about any of that information?
Yeah, it's a lot of information. I just threw at you guys.
Okay, so somebody said, does early action affect your chance of being accepted? Yes. So if you apply early decision, which is the legally binding one, that shows that you are very interested in that school. It's a bit easier to get in. If it's an Ivy League, it's hard to get in general, but if you apply early decision, it might be a little bit easier for you to get in. Similarly, with early action, there's fewer people who they're going through the applications of, so they might be more selective, but because there are fewer people in general, they can actually accept more students from the early action. So it gives you almost like priority as a considered candidate. So I would recommend, that's something I regret, is I was not planning and timing myself well enough where I could apply early action. So if you are interested in that, you should definitely start early. If you're a junior right now, you should, or like an incoming senior, you should start now with your applications and essays. Okay, Letty.
Okay, so is early action, are there any like extra requirements or hurdles that you have to go through? Do you have to like apply earlier than everyone else, or?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So it's called early action. Yeah, when you apply earlier, so you're being considered earlier, and then you get your feedback, like, did you get in or did you not? And sometimes you'll get deferred, which just means they're going to consider you again with the regular applicant pool, but they couldn't make your decision the first time.
Yeah, so usually that's the only extra requirement, is that you have to turn it in early, and besides that, you're doing the same application but just at an earlier deadline. Yeah. So if that's something that's important to you, instead of writing the actual deadline, write like the early deadline in your calendar, so that it's basically the regular deadline to you, because otherwise it's going to get lost in the sea. And you can also prioritize those schools so you can get that application in on time. Okay. Oh, and also you're probably not going to, this might not mean anything to you right now, but on the common application, you can turn in different schools' applications at different times. Because I didn't know that for a long time, and I was like, I have to do it all at once, like press submit. But you can like do one at a time. So that'll be important to know later on.
Yes. Okay, Colette, did you have another question?
Yeah. So do those usually, like, you have to do them by August? I mean, by like September or October?
I think it's like November. Like, okay, so UCs are late November that you have to turn them in. So I think it's around the same time that you have to do early acts.
Okay.
So yeah, everything has different deadlines. That's why we wanted to like just show you what the options are, because a lot of students don't know that they have options like the UCs and that the UCs are submitted separately. So they would like leave it to the last minute and be like, oh my God, it's due in a week. And I'm like, yeah, it was due in a week. So yeah, that kind of helps. Okay, I definitely, oh, sorry, Madeline. Okay, Madeline, mute yourself. I definitely have to go in about 10 minutes because I have to teach a lesson at 4, but I'm going to move forward into our mental health tip. This is our first mental health tip. Obviously, like we said earlier, Cities Rise and Cities Rise Youth Network is a mental health organization. So our priority here is making sure that you are thinking about you're maintaining a positive mental health during the college application process and choosing a college and a major and deciding which ones you want to apply to. So our first tip of this entire program is when we are thinking about colleges and, you know, thinking about majors and applications, we all understand that can be really stressful. It's very time consuming. it can be really overwhelming. I was so overwhelmed because I just wasn't planning and I didn't know all of this information. That's why we're here for you. What we recommend is taking it piece by piece. That's why we've broken it up into the 4 weeks. So over the next week, we want you to complete these action tasks if you can. Madeline, you want to read them out for us?
Yeah, sorry. I think there might have just been like a small earthquake or something. I don't know.
My pool is like going crazy.
It's not just me. I was like, am I going crazy or is the house shaking a bit here?
I'm like a mile away from you, Madeline. How did I not feel that?
I was like, do I need to get under the table? I think it's fine though. I think it stops. So that was fun timing. Glad to hear it's you too, Colette. Okay, so anyways, I'm a bit shaken now. Literally, I guess. So for action tasks for the mental health tip number 1, we have some different thoughts. So you can make short lists, you can journal, find the fun and goals in it, and collaborate with others. So when you're thinking about this gigantic process and all the different parts and all the information we threw at you today, like Sara said, it can be very overwhelming and it's just kind of a lot. And I know because I switched my major kind of late in the process, I had a really stressful time and I had to kind of rush to get everything done. So the fact that you're even here at this meeting today is an amazing sign for you, and it means that you're starting early, and it'll definitely be helpful for you in this process to just have an early start. That's the first step. And so what I wanted to say is I just take it piece by piece and don't feel like right now you need to do every part of the application or know everything. This program kind of helps us break it up into different steps, and just right now focusing on what you've learned today, and anything you want to do, like start researching, that can be really helpful. And so hopefully the fact that we're splitting it up will help that already. And then also we'll talk about planning later, so don't feel stressed that you have to plan everything now. And you can make lists of brainstorming and ideas to help relieve extra stress and overwhelm. And I think writing things down in general when you have so much thrown at you can be super helpful, and just thinking about things you're interested in now. It's a really great step. And then journal about ideas and write out what you might imagine your future looking like. You can use prompts for this. You can find fun and goals in it to keep you motivated and excited. It kind of ties into prepping for next week too. You can start brainstorming for essays and writing lists down for that, making lists about ideas, journaling about essay topic ideas if you'd like. That can all be a good start into that kind of thing. And just in general, writing things down, getting it out of your brain, and remembering that each step of the process is a lot, but if you take it step by step, it's going to be a lot easier. And just know that wherever you're at right now is great. You have done nothing wrong. You're like literally in the perfect place by starting right now. And even if you started later, you'd be fine too. And it'll get done eventually. I really thought it never would, but it did for me. And so that tells me that it will get done for you.
Yes.
Sara, did you want to add anything else?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Madeline was right. We're going to talk about essays next week. So if you want to start brainstorming, you can even start writing if you're interested. That might just help you a lot next week, but we'll get in depth. Hopefully we'll have a guest speaker as well if we can get one. We just wanted to say thank you so much for coming. We know this went like half an hour overtime. I promise next week will be better timed. This was the most content heavy. And that's why it took so long to get through everything. But thank you all for the 12 of you who are here. Thank you for sticking with it for the rest of this. If you need to contact either one of us, here's our emails and our Instagram handles. So, if you're like uncomfortable emailing or it's easier, you can always just DM us on Instagram. And we will be back next Thursday at 2:00 PST. So yes, if you have any questions, feel free to stick back. But yeah, thank you all so much. And
Thanks so much for coming.
We'll hopefully see you next week. Be sure to tell your friends if you want them to join. So
yeah.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.